So let's click on the Start New Application or Start New Android Studio, and let's call it, what are we gonna call it? App PHP or something, doesn't matter. And let's just go back to the users. Let's go to my desktop, YouTube and Android. Awesome. So with that we can click next, leave it on Gingerbread, and here let's go with the empty or basic. Let's go with empty. Call it main activity and click finish. So let that build and all of that stuff. This is gonna take a couple of minutes, so I'll just fast forward this. Alright, so that finished. Now we should have this application kind of thing. We want to get rid of a couple of things here. We just want to get rid of the little text box, and let's add our own. Okay, we want a large text in the center, and let's say username here. Let's get a plain text window just underneath it. Let's stretch it from one side to the other. Let's add another large text in the middle, call it password, and let's take, in this case we'll go with the plain text again. You could go with the password, you would go with the password field in this case. Actually, let's do that. Let's go with the password. Let's stretch it all the way across, and let's add a button here that says login, and we'll add another button that's gonna be used for registering if you want to support that functionality in your application or whatever. It's there, you know. Okay, so we need to give IDs to these things, so let's call this username underscore txt. Yes, update, and the password is gonna be username underscore, or not username, password underscore txt. Yes. Okay, now that we have them added, we can go ahead. Oh, did we give the name to this one? Button. Let's go login underscore btn. Yes, and this is gonna be register underscore btn. Okay, so now that we have that, let's jump in Java right here. So on create, we want to get a couple of references. We want to get the reference to the login button and a reference to the register button. So let's go ahead and say Okay, so it's a button. We'll probably have to import that. Hit Alt Enter, and let's call it login. btn is equal to find view by ID, and it's gonna be in r.id.login btn. We will need to cast this back into a button. There we go. So now that we have that, we can pretty much duplicate it. So Control D to duplicate and call this register btn, and find the thing with the ID of register.btn. Okie doke. So now we need to add events to the buttons. So the event, the click event, is basically just called click. Oh man, how am I doing with the actual space? And it's not too bad. Okay, so let's go ahead and say login btn.add onClick listener, new onClick listener. That's just gonna create a method to, it's gonna override a method and all of that stuff, so that's all good. So what do we want to happen once we click the login button? We want to grab the the username field and the password field and get a string from it, or get the text within it. So we want to go ahead and say string username is equal to, well, before we actually do that, we need to get the instance or the reference to them fields. So what is that again? It was text field, or no, it's text view. Text view, okay. So Alt and Enter to import. Username txt is equal to, let's typecast it here to view, text view, and it's find by ID, and it's r.id. Email login form. No, it's just username underscore txt. Okay. Why you not like it? It's edit text. Oh, okay. Edit text. That's what it was. There we go, and just import that as well using the Alt and Enter. Duplicate this to get the password. Password underscore txt is the same thing, except this is the password txt. Okay, now that we have that, we can extract text from within it. So string username is equal to username txt dot get text dot to string, and string password is equal to password.txt dot get text dot to string. So now that we have that sorted out, we can go ahead and start sending requests to the server. Okay, so now that we have that, we need to send a request to a server. But to do that, we need to create a new Java class. I mean, this is basically the hardest part and the most annoying part you'll ever come across, and it's dealing with the HTTP requests in Java. And that's why I wonder what the hell the Java developers were doing when they were making this. They made it such a pain in the ass, it's not even funny. Okay, so it's the class is server post. We'll just call it server post, it doesn't matter. Okay, so server post, we need to make it a background activity, which it's just an activity that runs in the background. It's like a separate thread, so it extends from the asynchronous task, and it's gonna be, in our case, string void. It's gonna complain, oh, I need to override some methods, blah blah blah. We can just go ahead and say, okay, go ahead and generate it for us. What do you want to generate? I want to generate the override method, and the override method that I want to override is do in background. Boom, and now it's gonna stop complaining. So now that we have that, we can change this to data or something, or even params. That's what I like. I don't like if I can strings. Okay, so our class is gonna contain a couple of private variables. One is gonna be the context, which is gonna reference the intent or the screen that actually requested this to trigger. We'll call it context. We'll keep data that we want to send to the server. We'll keep it as a private variable as well, so that multiple methods can reference it. And we'll keep another private boolean, and let's call that success is equal to false. This is going to be our switch to determine if we logged in successfully or not. So by default it's false, and whenever it's false it's just going to but it's going to know that we haven't logged in yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and start coding this. Alright, so let the pain begin. To start off, we need the HTTP URL connection, and it's gonna be equal to, or it's gonna be called connection, and it's gonna be equal to null at this point, because we wanna just declare it, but we're gonna initialize it in the try and catch statement down here, because these things can cause exceptions if something goes wrong. So we're gonna do everything within these within this try and catch right here. So let's just make a exception here and just call it E, and we'll determine what we want to do with exceptions. For now we just want to maybe let's e dot print stack trace, so that's going to break our program and show where the problem is in case there is any problem. So now that we have that, we need to create some sort of a URL. So let's do that here as well. URL is going to be just called URL. Need to import it. Did I import it? Yeah, Alt Enter. There we go. Alt and Enter. Okay, so now that we have that URL, we need to go ahead and specify what the URL, the voice crack, what the URL actually is. So here we're going to say URL is equal to the IP address of our server, which you can find in here if you go to CMD and say IP config and find your IPv4 address. As you can see here, it's 192.168.2.100 for me. So for you, it might be different. So in this case, I'm just going to say HTTP 192.168.2.100 and it's on port 8888. Script that you want to access is login.php. Okay, now it's going to complain, blah, blah, blah. It's not looking for a string. It's looking for a URL object. So we can just enclose that in new URL and close that off right here. Now we have this URL here, but we're not done yet. So now that we have a URL, we can go ahead and create a new connection. So a connection is, remember we declared a connection right here. It's a HTTP URL connection is equal to a URL dot open connection. But now that's going to complain as well because these two are two different data types. So we need to typecast this back into the URL connection. Just copy and paste that there, boom, done. Okay, once we have that, we can go ahead and set a couple of parameters for the connection there, set a couple of things. So we want to set the request method to be post. So just capital letter post. We also want to set the do input and do output to true because we want to send and receive do input to true. Do output and do input. There we go. The do input basically means that we want to put things into the connection, and do output is that we want to read the request back. Okay, so now that we have that, we can create a couple of streams. So the first one is the output stream. The output stream, I will just call it DOS is equal to connection dot get output stream. So it's going to get the output stream of this connection here so that we can actually send something to the server. Output is used for outputting information to the server, not the other way around. But anyway, we need a buffered writer to actually send or to write data to the server or to the connection. Okay, so with the buffered writer, we're just going to call it BW is equal to new buffered writer, and it takes in a new output stream writer, and that takes in the output stream, which is just OS. Okay, so that completes that. Now we need to push a couple of things into the buffered writer. So we can say buffered writer.write, but what do we want to write? We want to write data, and we want to write this data right here. So we can just say this dot data. Awesome. And once we write some data to the stream, we want to say I want to flush it. I want to send it off to the server. Just send it out there. And once it's pushed to the server, we want to close the connection, and we want to close the output stream so that there isn't multiple connections coming from the same app, which is gonna, create problems on your server if multiple users have active connections happening and you're not shutting them down properly. Okay, so once we have that, we want to actually get the response from the server to see if the thing was actually sent. Okay, so to get that is just say int response or risk code. I'll just call it risk code is connection dot get response code. So based on what the server returns, we can determine if the server was online or if it's offline or if it's reachable or not. Get response code, by default, it's going to return 200 for HTTP. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. We are looking for 200. If that's good, if rest code is equal to HTTP connection.HTTP okay, we want to process the data. We want to see, just say, okay, so what was your output? Just like here we had output of true or output of false. So we want to get that output and read it in our code. So with that said, we can just go ahead and say buffered reader in this case. Buffered reader, because we want to read things in, is called it's called br is equal to new buffered reader, and that takes in a new input stream reader, and that takes an input stream. So it's the connection dot get input stream. That's a really long function there, or a method, but I mean, you can simplify it by, you know, just saying something like input stream is is equal to connection dot input stream. I mean, it doesn't change anything, so it's up to you if you want to do something like this. There we go. It might make this line a bit smaller, but again, it doesn't matter. I prefer to have it all in one line. It's just my preference, I guess. Anyway, with that said, we can say something like while we haven't created this thing to hold the output, so string line is equal to nothing, and string result or response is equal to nothing as well. So while line is equal to br dot read line, and all of that is not equal to null. So while that is not equal to null, which means that there is more things to read, we would just want to get that line and append it to the response. So response plus equals line. The reason I'm not saying br dot read line is not equal to null and then say response plus equal br dot read line is every time you call read line, that's going to read the next line. So basically you would only be recording every second line every iteration, so that's no good. Anyway, now that we have that, we can say if response in this case is equal to 1. If it is equal to 1, we want to say this dot success is equal to true, which means that they successfully typed in their username and password. And after that, we just want to say br.close. We just want to close this buffered reader right there. If you don't want to do anything else here, you just can do something like that to make it a bit cleaner. But yeah. Now, the only other two things that we have to do is create a constructor for this class. So you'll see why we use that, and then we'll mess around with this as well for the login and the register.